Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross, he's back with us. Bryan, it is one to watch because the Carolinas these past 2 weeks of note have just been battered. We have the king tide happening right now. We had 2 named storms last week. And so now with this possible coastal storm, I know that there are things that we still need to learn, but there are a few things that we're certain about.
Yeah, it's very high likelihood that this low is going to form. A front moves offshore. Strong fall front moves offshore on Thursday off the southeast coast. And this very sharp dip in the jet stream, yet another one over the east coast of the U.S. or eastern part of the U.S. Is very likely to form another frontal wave, it's called. And it's actually, yes, exactly what the graphic shows, but there's a front attached to it. So this is not a tropical system. By definition, a tropical system is a system without a front. Even a subtropical storm can't have fronts attached. And this is definitely going to have a front attached. And then the question is, where does it move, and does it sit over that warm water long enough for the fronts to sort of dissipate? The consensus is no. There you see the front attached there, that it drifts north, so that when you get to Sunday looks like the strongest winds, but by Sunday, depending on exactly where it's located, if it's a little north of there, it's going to let up the pressure on the Outer Banks, but there's going to be a lot of pressure in the Norfolk area, in the Tidewater, and points north all the way up to Jersey Shore, even Long Island, and into New England. Very strong onshore winds and persistent onshore winds for a few days. So very often, as we've seen, it's those persistent winds that don't allow essentially the high tide to come completely out. That's when we get the coastal problems. And there you see, it really depends on exactly where the low is located, on who gets the strongest just onshore winds. But when those lines are all packed together like that, that means the winds are directly onshore all along the coastline. But you see, if it were, let's say that the yellow lines were right in that graphic, that wouldn't be so bad for the Outer Banks. That's not where the wind, the pressure from the wind is then. It would be letting up by then, and the wind would be more northerly on the Outer Banks. Not that that's nothing if it's strong, but there it doesn't look very strong. It looks like the stronger winds have moved north up the coast in the mid-Atlantic.
And of course, with that blocking high to the north, kind of questions on how that is going to play out. This morning, a lot of the computer model runs kind of suggesting, does this low kind of meander off the coastline of the Carolinas?
Right. Yeah, meander and eventually weaken. So it looks like it peaks sometime around Sunday, and it peaks as a significant storm. I mean, it peaks as a storm that would be a strong tropical storm at the very least in terms of the wind speed. And then north of it, because the wind is being compressed between the low pressure system and as you said, Britta, that strong high to the north. It's like a tube of toothpaste. You squeeze the tube, and there comes the toothpaste in that direction, right? It's that kind of jet of air that's in a band. It's a substantial band, hundreds of miles wide, but north of the low and south of the high. Very much like we saw after Imelda, that it was all aimed there at North Carolina and on down to North Florida, and that's where we had the significant coastal flooding. This is going to be in a little different location. This is going to be from the Carolinas moving north up the coast, it looks like right now, and then in theory next week it lets up just because the thing that's powering it, the upper level system, kind of opens up.
And that brings up the other point. What is powering this thing? Because there is chatter about, are there any tropical characteristics associated with it? But you sort of nipped it in the bud when you had talked about even a subtropical storm. Did I hear you right? Can't have fronts associated with them, or can have fronts?
Cannot have fronts, but the question is, some of the models do take it north for a while and then dip it back south, and then it sits over the warmer water. So once it gets north of North Carolina, the water is cool. From Virginia north, the water is cool, and it's not going to be a tropical system. But to the south, and there's the Gulf Stream there, if it's very close to the coast, if it sits there a few days, then what happens is the contrast across the front essentially goes away, and the front just kind of dissipates, and the system starts getting energy from the warm water and kind of pushes the fronts out. So that can happen. It doesn't look likely. The projections that are done, Bob Hart, a professor at Florida State University, in fact, the chair of the meteorology department there, he's very famous for creating what's called a phase space, where they look and analyze the models and say, how tropical is this? And it's marginally, briefly tropical according to the current analysis of the models, but the models are a little bit all over the place. So, I mean, it's possible, but the tropical aspects are really not the issue here. The issue is that contrast between the low pressure, depending on how strong it gets, and the high pressure to the north, and that kind of blast of onshore winds, which are almost certain to cause some coastal flooding in that area. It's a matter of how bad it's going to be right now. Right.
So that covers the wind aspect of this. Let's tackle the rain aspect. Right now, WPC, pretty aggressive. Day 5, level 2 out of 4 flood threat posted for the coastal Carolinas. But looking back to what happened with Imelda, also we had a far out release of a level 2, but then we end up not getting a rain impact because Imelda's track shifts so dramatically. So what do we take from this in terms of using this information to prepare ourselves for a rain impact?
And to piggyback, Brian, what you were showing with Jerry.
I think they just have to be ready.
Some of the moisture with Jerry, is it possible, Matthew had brought it up, is it possible that maybe there's an interaction here, or is it way too premature?
Well, I think the issue with Jerry is more this front, and that the large upper level low that is sort of triggering the front, pushing the front along, might push the front all the way through South Florida here too, which would be a wonderful thing because it's been raining for months here. But yeah, but you know, eventually all of that kind of becomes one thing. I don't think Jerry's moisture, at least based on what we know now, will wrap back. But you know, how much rain we get on the coast has everything to do with exactly where that low ends up being located. You know, if it's just a little bit farther offshore, as we saw with Imelda, it makes it just a whole huge amount of difference. Or even Aaron, how much rain do we get in that you know, coastal band from the low country on up the coast? So I think that's a too close to call at this point, but they need to be ready for that. To me, the bigger threat is the coastal flooding threat in especially North Carolina, in the Tidewater, and points north up the coast.
It does really make sense, too, when you're talking about that onshore flow, even during low tide times, you're not getting the push away from land like you would be getting when things are a little quieter and we're not dealing with such a strong onshore wind. All right, well, it might not be tropical in nature, but the insight's much appreciated. Fox Weather hurricane specialist Bryan Norcross for us.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Brian.